Barron sat hunched over his second-hand laptop, the glow of the screen casting a pale light across his cluttered apartment. The email sat unopened in his inbox, its bold subject line glaring at him. Subject: Tesla interview invitation, Advanced Mars Initiative. He stared at it, unblinking, as if it might vanish if he looked too long. His coffee sat untouched beside him, growing cold. Why would Tesla, reach out to him? Sure, he was good at his job. Designing energy-efficient systems for small-scale projects had been his thing for years, but Mars? He'd never even left the Midwest. His finger hovered over the mouse, his pulse quickening. When he finally clicked, the email was short, almost dismissive in tone. Dear Barron Caldwell. You are invited to interview for a position on our Advanced Mars Initiative. Details to follow. Confidentiality is required. Tesla recruitment team *. That was it. No details, no specifics. Just enough to set his imagination ablaze. He scrolled back up, rereading the subject line. Advanced Mars Initiative. The word sounded like something from a science fiction novel he might have read as a kid. For a moment, Barron allowed himself to picture it, a red landscape stretching endlessly under a thin pink sky. The faint hum of life support systems. Silence so vast it would swallow his thoughts. He shivered. Then reality kicked in. They've made a mistake, he muttered aloud. Probably meant someone else. Yet, deep down, a tiny flicker of excitement wrestled with the doubt. What if it wasn't a mistake? He pulled up Tesla's website, scrolling through sleek images of rockets, electric vehicles, and Elon's ubiquitous face. The man's audacity was legendary. Was this invitation just another one of Musk's quirks, casting the net wide to see who'd bite? For hours, Barron debated whether to respond. His anxiety made excuses, the rent was due, his current job was stable, and he wasn't exactly cut out for Mars-level innovation. But the flicker of curiosity persisted. What if this was the opportunity he'd been waiting for? Finally, his fingers hovered over the keyboard. He typed a brief response. Thank you for the invitation. I accept. He hit send before he could overthink it. As the message disappeared into cyberspace, Barron leaned back in his chair, staring at the cracked ceiling above him. Outside, the city hummed with its usual noise, sirens, car horns, the faint chatter of late-night pedestrians. But inside Barron's tiny apartment, there was a strange stillness, a feeling like the air itself was holding its breath. Tomorrow, everything could go back to normal. Or maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't. Barron stepped out of the rideshare, clutching his backpack like a lifeline. Tesla's headquarters loomed in front of him, glass and steel shimmering under the California sun. The building was sleek, futuristic, and completely intimidating. Barron adjusted his tie, a hand-me-down from his older brother, and muttered to himself, "You're just here for the experience. They're not actually going to hire you." Inside, the lobby buzzed with quiet energy. Engineers in hoodies tapped furiously on laptops while groups of suits murmured in hushed conversations. Barron's sneakers squeaked against the polished floor as he approached the check-in desk. "Name?" asked the receptionist, barely looking up. Barron Caldwell. I'm here for an interview." The receptionist handed him a visitor's badge without a word and pointed toward a sleek glass elevator. As Barron stepped inside, he caught a glimpse of a massive mural stretching across one wall. It depicted Mars in vivid red hues, with a bold caption, "Adapt or Vanish." The elevator doors slid shut, and Barron's stomach dropped, not just from the ascent but from the weight of that phrase. Adapt or vanish. Was he the kind of person who adapted? He wasn't so sure. By the time he reached the 5th floor, his palms were sweaty, and his heart pounded like he'd just run a marathon. He stepped into the waiting area, where other candidates sat, exuding an air of calm confidence. One of them even had a prototype rocket engine diagram open on their tablet. Barron sank into a chair and stared at his hands. In this room of innovators, he felt like an imposter. "Let's start with something straightforward," said the woman at the head of the table, her voice sharp and professional. She introduced herself as Dr. Yen, head of propulsion systems. The panel of 3 other engineers sat beside her, their expressions neutral but observant. Barron cleared his throat. "Sure. Straightforward sounds great." The first question was a technical one about propulsion efficiency in low-gravity environments. Barron's shoulders relaxed. He knew this. He launched into an explanation about optimizing fuel consumption ratios, and by the time he finished, Dr. Yen gave a small nod of approval. The next few questions followed a similar pattern. They touched on energy storage, thermal management, and the challenges of solar power on Mars. Each time, Barron managed to hold his own, though he occasionally stumbled when their follow-ups became particularly detailed. By the end of the hour, Barron felt cautiously optimistic. He wasn't perfect, but he hadn't completely embarrassed himself either. As the panel scribbled notes, Barron glanced at a window overlooking the Tesla campus. Beyond the sprawling complex, the horizon stretched endlessly, the faint haze of smog blurring the line between earth and sky. He barely noticed when the door opened behind him. "Elon Musk," a voice said, cutting through the hum of quiet conversation. Barron turned in his chair, and there he was. Elon Musk strode into the room, wearing a black t-shirt and jeans, looking more like a rock star than the head of a billion-dollar company. His presence filled the space, and even the panel of seasoned engineers seemed to straighten in their seats. "Let's skip the boring parts," Elon said, waving a hand dismissively toward the stack of papers in front of Dr. Yen. "I want to ask him something." The panel exchanged glances, but no one objected. Elon leaned against the table, studying Barron like a puzzle he was trying to solve. "So," Elon began, "if you were stranded on Mars and could only take one album with you, what would it be?" Barron blinked. He hadn't expected this. One album?" "Yes, one. No Wi-Fi. No Spotify. Just you, Mars, and one album." Barron hesitated, his brain scrambling for an answer. Finally, he blurted out, "Maybe Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon?" "Seems fitting." Elon smirked, his eyes narrowing with amusement. "Cliché, but I'll allow it." Barron let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He was just starting to relax when Elon's expression grew serious. "All right, let's get to the real question," Elon said, leaning forward. His voice dropped slightly, commanding attention. "If you had to live on Mars without Wi-Fi, what would you do?" The room went completely silent. Even the air seemed to pause. Barron's mind raced. He thought of all the logical answers he could give: work on solutions, focus on survival, innovate, but none of them felt genuine. And then, without thinking, he said the only thing that came to mind. "I'd cry." For a moment, nothing happened. The panel exchanged startled glances. Then one of the engineers let out a muffled laugh, and the tension in the room broke. Elon didn't laugh. He tilted his head, studying Barron like a scientist observing an experiment. "Interesting answer," he said finally. "Why cry?" The room was so quiet Barron could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. Elon's gaze pinned him to the spot. "Why cry?" Barron swallowed hard. His cheeks burned, and he felt the weight of every eye in the room on him. For a moment, he thought about backpedaling, trying to salvage the situation with a clever or technical response. But something in Elon's tone, curious rather than dismissive, made him pause. "Well," Barron began hesitantly. "Because I'd feel disconnected. I mean, Wi-Fi is more than just the internet. It's connection. To people. To knowledge. To everything. Mars is already so isolating. Without any connection, it'd feel like being completely alone in the universe. He stopped, suddenly aware of how raw his words sounded. That's why. Elon didn't respond right away. He just stared at Barron, his face unreadable. The silence stretched long enough for Barron to start second-guessing everything he'd just said. Finally, Elon leaned back in his chair, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Honest. I like that. Barron blinked. You do? Elon nodded. Mars isn't for the faint of heart. It's for people who admit their fears, then figure out how to work past them. So, let's figure this out. If there's no Wi-Fi on Mars, what would you do about it? Build something? Innovate? Crying is fine, but not forever. Barron felt his mind shift gears, the initial embarrassment melting into something else, curiosity, maybe even excitement. I mean, theoretically, we could create a localized network on Mars. Something solar-powered to work around the dust storms. The infrastructure would need to be lightweight, scalable, and able to function independently of Earth-based systems. As Barron spoke, his hands moved instinctively, sketching invisible diagrams in the air. Elon's expression shifted, his eyes lighting up with that spark of intensity people recognized from countless interviews and press conferences. Interesting, Elon said, interrupting. Keep going. The panel had fallen silent as Barron spoke. Even Dr. Yen, who had seemed unimpressed earlier, leaned forward slightly in her chair. Barron, lost in thought, continued to sketch out his vision for a Mars-based communication network. Dust storms would be the biggest challenge, Barron explained. But if we designed modular units with self-cleaning solar panels, we could keep the network running even during bad weather. Something like a series of interconnected nodes that function as mini-servers, creating a Martian intranet. Elon's eyebrows lifted. A Martian intranet. I like that. Barron hesitated. I mean, it's not perfect. There are challenges. Data speeds wouldn't be great, and it would take time to set up the infrastructure. Elon waved a hand dismissively. Everything worth doing takes time. What matters is the mindset, seeing problems as opportunities. You're thinking the right way. Barron wasn't sure what to say. He had walked into the room feeling like an outsider, certain he didn't belong. But now, as Elon spoke, he felt something different. A flicker of possibility, as if maybe, just maybe, he wasn't completely out of his depth. As the interview wrapped up, Elon gave Barron a lingering look. You've got potential. Let's see if you can handle the rest. After the formal interview ended, Barron found himself ushered into a smaller, more private room with just Elon. The two of them sat at a simple table, a stark contrast to the high-tech conference room they'd just left. Elon leaned forward, his fingers steepled. Okay, Barron. Let's get real. Mars isn't just some sci-fi dream. It's happening. But surviving there isn't just about tech. It's about resilience. Creativity. Adaptability. Do you have that? Barron hesitated. I think so. I mean, I'd like to think I do. Elon cut him off. Think fast. You're on Mars. Dust storm hits. Communication with Earth goes down. The Wi-Fi system you built crashes. What's your first move? Barron's mind raced. Check the solar panels. If the dust is too thick, power's likely the first issue. I'd focus on conserving energy and running diagnostics to isolate the problem. Okay, Elon said, nodding. Diagnostics fail. Dust storm lasts longer than expected. Now what? Barron felt the pressure mounting, but he forced himself to stay calm. Fallback systems. If the primary network's down, there should be a redundancy built in. Even if it's slower or less reliable, it'd buy time to fix the main system. Elon tilted his head, as if weighing the answer. And if the fallback fails? Barron hesitated. The question felt less technical and more philosophical. Finally, he said, I'd adapt. Rely on local resources. Improvise. The key isn't just building a perfect system, it's building one you can fix under pressure. For the first time, Elon smiled, a genuine, approving smile. Good answer. Barron exhaled, realizing he'd been holding his breath. Here's the thing, Elon said, leaning back. Mars will test people in ways they can't imagine. It's not just about solving problems, it's about staying calm when everything falls apart. You've got that spark. I can see it. Barron didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to this kind of praise, especially from someone like Elon Musk. But deep down, he felt something stir, a quiet confidence he hadn't known was there. The interview was over, or so Barron thought. He was halfway to the lobby when an assistant intercepted him. Mr. Musk would like to speak with you. Alone. Alone? Barron nodded, suppressing the wave of panic rising in his chest. The assistant led him down a corridor that seemed quieter than the rest of the buzzing campus, finally stopping at a small office with glass walls. Elon stood inside, gazing out a window at the sprawling Tesla campus. Come in, Elon said without turning around. Barron stepped inside, his nerves buzzing. Elon gestured to a chair but remained standing. For a moment, they were silent, the weight of the conversation ahead thick in the air. You know, Elon began, I've interviewed thousands of people. Most of them have answers rehearsed to perfection. Smart, competent, polished, but they're not real. You gave me something honest. Barron wasn't sure if it was a compliment or a critique, so he stayed quiet. Elon finally turned to face him. Mars isn't just an engineering challenge, Barron. It's a human one. We're not just sending machines, we're sending people. And people are fragile, messy, unpredictable. I worry about that. About how we'll handle the loneliness, the fear, the sheer scale of it all. Barron nodded slowly. I think about that too. I mean, even here on Earth, people struggle with isolation. On Mars, it's hard to imagine. It's not just hard, Elon said. It's terrifying. But it's also necessary. If humanity wants to survive, we have to figure it out. He paused, his gaze sharp. Do you think you could handle it? Barron hesitated, then answered truthfully. I don't know. But I think I'd try. Elon smiled faintly. Good. That's the only answer that matters. 3 days later, Barron sat at his kitchen table, staring at his laptop. The email had arrived that morning. Congratulations. You've been selected for the Advanced Mars Initiative. The words felt surreal. He reread them 3 times, trying to make them feel real. Along with the offer letter were detailed instructions about confidentiality, onboarding, and the first phases of training. The project was ambitious, to say the least, an unprecedented effort to establish humanity's first foothold on Mars. Barron leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. He should feel elated. This was the kind of opportunity people dreamed about. But all he felt was a gnawing uncertainty. What if he wasn't good enough? What if he failed under pressure? What if he got there and couldn't handle the isolation, the endless expanse of red dirt and silence? His phone buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. It was his sister, Clara. So, she said when he answered, did you get it? Barron hesitated, then sighed. Yeah. I got it. And? Anne. I don't know. It's Mars, Clara. Mars. That's insane. Clara chuckled. Yeah, it's insane. But you've always been the one to overthink everything. Maybe this time, you should just leap. Leap? Yeah, she said. You're never going to have all the answers. Sometimes, you just have to trust that you'll figure it out along the way. Barron was silent for a long moment. You think I can do this? I know you can, Clara said firmly. That night, Barron walked to a nearby park. It was quiet, the kind of cold, crisp evening where the stars seemed a little brighter than usual. He found an empty bench and sat, pulling out the printed offer letter from his pocket. The words, Mars Initiative, seemed to glow faintly in the dim light of the street lamp above. He thought about the interview, about Elon's questions, about his own fears. He thought about the mural in Tesla's office, adapt or vanish. His mind wandered to the image of Mars, barren, silent, yet full of potential. It wasn't just about surviving on another planet. It was about building something new, something that could outlast him. It was about proving to himself that he could do it. He looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, Mars was waiting. The thought scared him, but it also thrilled him. Barron pulled out his phone and opened the email from Tesla. His thumb hovered over the reply button. He typed 2 words. I'm in. Then, without giving himself time to second guess, he hit send. As he walked home, the fear was still there, but so was something else, hope. Whatever came next, he would face it. For the first time in a long time, he felt ready.